Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest episode of Corn Ferry Live. Great to have you all back in what should be a real cracker. As I'm sure you know by now, our aim here is to pick a topic that's in the news or maybe a theme we know you're battling with today. Then we go and find some Corn Ferry brains to help break it apart in the aim of leaving you all better equipped to tackle that topic right now. But as always, we need you to get involved and tell us what you're really thinking. So get tapping, put your questions in the chat and I'll put those to our experts later. As I'm sure you all know by now, our topic for today is From Reluctance to Readiness. How do we engage Gen Z into wanting leadership roles? Gen Zs are rewriting the rule book and it's time to figure out how we can attract, develop and inspire them to lead. We're tackling reshaping management roles, leveraging technology and fostering purpose-driven leadership. Out with the old one-size-fits-all approach and in with coaching and career growth. So, whether you're a skeptical executive, a curious manager, or a proud Gen Z yourself, get ready for some fresh insights, bold ideas, and maybe even a few uncomfortable truths along the way. And to get us all warmed up, I have a question for all of you out there. Yes, this early, I want to get you involved. If you were offered a leadership role today, how likely would you be to accept it? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 equals pretty much a no, thank you, I'm not interested, and 5 being yes, please sign me up. Pop it in the chat and we'll come back to some of those later. Right, let's dive in. As always, I'm your host, Darren Bolton, Chief Creative Officer here at Corn Ferry, and today I'm joined by 2 fantastic guests, hopefully with slightly different perspectives on our topic. First up, we have Chloe Carr, Communications Specialist at the Corn Ferry Institute, and also Dr. Flo Falai, Senior Client Partner here at Corn Ferry. Welcome both.
Thank you, Darren. Great to be here.
All right, how are you both doing? You all right?
Doing great. Happy
Doing
to
well.
be here and excited to get into a conversation about Gen Z.
Oh, yes, of course. We'll be digging deeply into that one. I'm hoping our audience are getting us some really challenging questions today and really put you to the test. So be prepared.
Okay.
And while we're waiting for those questions coming, let's get the ball rolling straight away because time is always of an essence. Let's start by unpacking why do we think some Gen Zs are, I don't know if it's the right word, but hesitant to step into management roles. As our Gen Z representative, Chloe, I'll turn to you first. What is it about leadership that feels unappealing?
Yeah, and I think to start, I would say it might be a misrepresentation to think that Gen Z finds leadership unappealing, but maybe just we associate leadership with management as we have come to know it. I would say I've seen a lot of leadership in my peers growing up being a Gen Zer, with starting businesses, side hustles, and kind of taking a lot of their work into their own hands. But part of that is them kind of, I think, wanting to own the way that they lead and do it in kind of a new way. I think a lot of us grew up kind of associating leadership with this lack of support and long hours. A lot of, I know for me, I see my parents grow up and have to work on the weekends and send emails on Sundays. And that was not necessarily the most exciting thing when you're thinking about it in terms of your own life. And then noting Gen Z's desire for purpose and impact, I think we think about it also being a little bit more as task manager, making sure everybody's doing their job versus, how are we actually making impact in the organization and also the world. So I would say that's part of it, but then also the well-being concerns that go along with the what we perceive as a lack of support and maybe long hours is, there was Corn Ferry research that we put out talking about how 69% of Gen Zers reported taking off time due to stress, mental health issues, and we experience the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness across all the generations right now. So I think it's fair that that's something that's going to be top of mind for us when we're thinking about leadership.
Sure. And we know that you kind of half mentioned there, or things that lead up to it. Burnout in leaders isn't helping the cause, and that's got to be a turn off for Gen Zers. So, Flo, can you give us some examples of what organisations are actually doing about that? What are they doing to kind of like turn that table or that idea around?
Absolutely. So I would say, as a parent of 3 Gen Zers, I'm also responsible for some of the hesitation that we're seeing with that generation. To Chloe's point, earlier point, I remember building out my office during COVID, and the kids thought it was going to be another place where they could play and have hangout time, but it turned out to be a place where I was buried and spent X number of hours during those months. So I own that, and I think, to your question around how do we start to even address this going forward, I think there are a couple of things, good examples I like to share. We work with a global tech firm who actually instituted an organizational-wide lab. So the lab concept, where across different bands of leadership, where leaders can come together, really drop the titles, drop some of those responsibility behind a little bit, and come into those sessions where they were able to share and have conversations that were both vulnerable, authentic, around the challenges that they were dealing with. So in a sense, it was space to actually allow them not to be overwhelmed by the weight of leadership, but really come into spaces where they can support each other, strengthen their decision-making ability, develop degrees of empathy, and also build some extensive amount of resilience. So we tag those labs as reframing leadership as a growth journey versus a burnout trap.
Gotcha. It's interesting. We've seen, I'm just seeing some chat going on here, and we've had quite a few 5s in the chat. So people are up for it. Yes, they're saying. Interestingly, there's a comment from one attendee says millennials are reluctant too. I don't even think it's millennials or Gen Zers. I think, it's an old way of leadership that we would all like to change. So it's interesting to see that coming through on the chat. So that's good stuff there. Flo, how are leadership roles sort of shifting from just delegating tasks to more of a coaching and collaboration style?
One of the good things that I love about Gen Z and the uniqueness of a multi-generational workforce is that it brings about a need for us to really imagine what good and ideal leadership looks like. So we're seeing a shift right now with Gen Z making up about 17%. I think they're projected, and Chloe can check the data on this, they're projected to be about 25% in 2030. So that's a significant number when you look at a generational shift. And one of these shifts that is actually necessitating from an organizational leadership standpoint is this shift from command and control to more coaching and collaboration, right? Leadership that actually leans away a little bit from just directing traffic, delegating tasks, driving performance, making decisions in isolation. We're seeing leadership is shifting to where there's more dialogue about how do we unlock potential, less so about do this and let me know when you're done, to more about how can I support you today. We're seeing leaders leaning into being more connectors. They're connecting people with resources and with other networks within the organization. We're seeing leaders show up as coaches and also as culture shapers. And what that means is they're asking better questions. They're asking and listening better and deeply. And then one of the uniqueness of this partnership that we're seeing also is that they're now beginning to co-create solutions with their team. And this is leading to actually higher and stronger relationship, increased retention, and an inclusive environment where everybody feels heard and seen. So this is great upside.
Yeah, and that taps into Chloe. We know that Gen Z, you've already mentioned values, purpose, and inclusivity. You just mentioned there. So, how can we shape management roles to better align with that from your perspective?
I don't think I would be a Gen Zer if I didn't mention technology and AI. I think using that in terms of learning and training to kind of personalize the way that we're learning to the way that we learn best. I think everyone learns differently and has their preferences, of course, but I think as generations, we also do have kind of distinctive ways that we learn best and train best, and that's kind of a great thing in where we're all different. I would say we were just talking about this earlier, but very Gen Z in the way that I am. Instant gratification, very quick hits, the TikTok generation of scrolling and needing to see kind of quick clips. That is more kind of for me, I guess I can't speak to all of Gen Z, but
Mm.
I think that that's probably a similar thing that you will see kind of throughout the generation, is that our learning styles are different. And part of that, I would also say, is experiential learning, learning on the job. I think there is an attentiveness to that is more engaging for Gen Z. I know, again, for me specifically, being able to kind of work through things live, ask questions live, and feel like I'm contributing to something that is meaningful in the moment, and not something that I just have to watch and wait till the end to, answer a few questions.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of that, that's a great way to kind of appeal more to Gen Z. But I would say overall, maybe shifting the mindset more from in leadership, from boss to something like a coach. I grew up playing sports, and that's something that I know is very comfortable for me. And I really do think millennial managers have led the way in this, in shifting this leadership mindset to focus on mentorship, skill building, and career development overall, rather than just kind of performance oversight. And I think when we shift that focus to the impact on the individual and not just numbers, it would mean more for Gen Z and kind of help with, again, that purpose and impact desire.
Great. Don't forget to get your questions in, and I do believe we have one, but please remember this flies past and then we get all the questions coming in after. Please get your question in as early as you can. Okay, so here's one from McKenna. Proud Gen Z here. What are the expectations of Gen Z in the workforce? Are there new ones? Are they the same as last year, 5 years ago, etc.? Everyone wants to have a little stab at that. Maybe Flo, that's something you can give us insight into.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I would say the expectations of Gen Z, as well as other generations in the workforce, will continue to evolve. And the reason why that's so is because the world is not staying constant. It's constantly changing. And one of the key things that we've been spending a lot of time talking with clients and trying to unlock is this essence of how do you lead through uncertainty? Right. So in terms of if I were to advise or coach or mentor a Gen Z, which I do quite a bit, I have 3 of them at home that I see almost every day. It is to say, lean into that discomfort and lean into the uncertainty, and stop seeking or trying to get to certainty, and focus and lean into getting to clarity. And clarity is again, it might be temporary, it might just be the day, it might be the week, it might be the view of what we currently see or know, but that's sufficient for you to act upon. And as you work on each sequence of clarity, I believe that you'll get to eventual certainty. But again, certainty is an unknown. It's a North Star in a sense, but clarity is how we actually execute on that. So that will be one thing I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, McKenna, for your question. Following McKenna's good footsteps and get your questions in, please. Okay, so spotting leadership potential isn't always about sort of titles and experience. So what's the secret? Is it about emotional intelligence, problem solving, or just the ability to keep their cool in these never-ending Zoom calls we seem to live in these days? Flo, any thoughts on that?
It's a combination of all of those that you've talked about, right? So it's a combination of soft and hard skill. This science has definitely convinced and shown us the way to some extent when it comes to leadership potential. It's not only about performance. The one piece that I would like to call out is there is something that we're also seeing that is actually very pertinent, which is learning agility, right? Remember, I talked a little bit about the uncertainty and the clarity and the certainty that folks want. This ability to actually develop and grow, which what we call to develop this learning agility, which is the ability to adapt, to stay curious, to grow through new experiences. It's such a key to leadership potential in general. And I think one of the things that we challenge everyone to work on and leaders to begin to continue to look at is how do people respond to challenge, feedback, and change, right? We're dealing with working virtually. We're dealing with, in some organizations, we return to the office. We're dealing with others who actually have some form of hybrid working arrangement, right? So there's a lot of change going on. And one of the key ways to actually identify potential is to see how the individuals adapt and flex and move to change, right? Is, for example, like spotting someone who doesn't play a game well, but someone who's learning the rules, they're quickly adapting in mid-game and helping others play better as well. So again, in summary, if I were to look for someone or help an organization spot what I call talent, I'm not looking for someone who has all the answers. That's old school. That was in the past. That's not what actually we want. What we're looking for now is folks who are hungry to grow, to learn, to be mentored, to be equipped, to be enabled, to be challenged. They're humble enough to remain, like we say in coaching, coachable, right? Humble enough to know that they don't know everything. They're open to insight, and they're also bold enough to act. So he's hungry, humble, and bold.
Lovely. That's great. And Chloe, what do you think would truly make Gen Z want to kind of stay and grow in a company? Is it purpose, career growth, or something we're all missing maybe?
I think it's a combination of all of that, actually. I think, well, I would say at the Korn Ferry Institute, we did a series of Who is Gen Z, written by my colleagues, and it kind of focuses on what it takes to attract, develop, and retain Gen Z leaders. And I would definitely recommend looking into that a little bit more. But kind of on the surface, it is talking about, it's above pay. What is a company offering? What are they say they offering, and do they mean it? And I think a lot of us Gen Zers are kind of growing up in an influencer world where everybody has a platform to say whatever they want. And so it's really up to us to kind of decipher who is meaning what they say, and we're getting good at it. And I think that's kind of the main thing there, is that we're able to kind of see through things. So wanting to work for organizations that align with our purpose and our values. I would say another thing is flexibility. I think it's a common misconception that you can only have flexibility where you have hybrid or remote work environments. I think flexibility can exist in a lot of different ways, including in having autonomy over your schedule. And that might look like, hey, I need to pop out for a doctor's appointment. I don't have any meetings, and I'm going to do it without having to necessarily explicitly ask for permission. I think during COVID, we saw this opening of Pandora's box, and we can't close it now. I think we've all seen what that looks like, and it's nice. It's great to be treated like an equal at all levels of the organization when it comes to flexibility and being able to manage your schedule. So I would say those are a few things. But I know for me personally, something that I love about my job is my manager. She sees me for my whole self and expects me to show up as my whole self every day to work. And it's not necessarily just asking what things am I completing and all that. Of course, that's part of it. But it's asking how I am, asking about my life, getting to know me on a deeper level. I think for a generation that kind of went through a lot of really crucial parts of our lives that was online, we crave connection just as much as anybody. I think that connection with people we work with is really important, and it's something that I know that I found here at Korn Ferry, and it makes me feel like I want to stay here for a while.
Chloe, we have a question specifically for you, apparently. This has been very rare. Usually it's open, but Flo, I'm sure you can answer as well. But it's from Adam for Chloe. Do you see leadership as a title to earn or a responsibility to take? What, in your view, would need to change in workplaces as Gen Z to step into leadership with confidence? Well, that was a question I was going to be asking. But anyway, Chloe, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great question. I would say that leadership is it's a little bit of both. It's a title to earn in the sense that, we're all kind of climbing this corporate ladder. And if we're talking very literally, I would say that's always an element. But a responsibility to take, I would agree, as it's kind of the duty of care to the next generation of teaching them and mentoring them. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with our bosses and our mentors. And it's kind of interesting, though, because, again, I would say that Gen Z does want to take on leadership roles, but in their own way. I think we want to come in and change up the way that we've been doing things, so that way it works for us, and not only us, but generations after us as well. We've seen this landscape shift, and it only makes sense that we would shift along with it.
Absolutely. I think we've got another question coming as well. Maybe we can get this one to flow. How do you reconcile Gen Z needs with more old-fashioned leaders that may resist to readily adapt to Gen Z needs? Can't believe they exist, Valerie, surely.
No, that's a great question, because I'm laughing because I'm the old guy now in the room, being part of Gen X, and it's a great question. And this is part of the tension that exists in the workforce today. The old guard, the older folks, are a little bit uncertain that if they were to let go certain expectation that they will get the same result. The new folks think the old way of doing business and doing work is not ideal. And so there's that tension. Yeah. As we all know, the way to move forward is to have conversation. The way to move forward is to actually bring this type of tension into the room and say, let's talk a little bit about expectation, for example. So let's talk about expectation management. Let's talk about quality of work. Let's talk about client relationship. Let's have those meaningful conversations on how do you see it and what does good and great look like. And I think the more we have that conversation, the better it becomes. My kids, for example, are constantly on their devices. I find it absolutely atrocious. We have moments where we have these difficult conversations where I'm either speaking loudly, many of you understand what that means, or I'm actually very calm. But the point is, the moments where we've made significant headway has been where I was calmer and trying to understand what they were doing on the devices. And I've learned that they were reading books on the devices. They were actually having conversation with peers. So again, I had to shift my thinking around the devices. And I think that's actually what is going to be required. This adaptability is not only on Gen Z, it's on all the different generations to really adapt to fit and understand what everybody needs to get the job done.
Absolutely, yeah. Great question. We were hoping for something like that, so that's good stuff. Flo, shouldn't organisations be thinking about integrating Gen Z into a broader leadership development strategy if this is all going to work?
Absolutely. There is, in fact, I was talking to a client who's also a parent of a Gen Z. Not to say that Gen Z is the top theme, is the focus of our dialogue, but that's kind of where our kids were or are. And as we were talking through this, he was talking about how many instances they don't call her, they don't spend time with her. And what she had to do was she had to figure out what actually they like doing and chose to put herself in that space. And for her kids, they love to actually spend time playing games. And she learned how to play games, Fortnite and all the different types of games. And now is doing gaming that they get to have moments of checking, how's your day, how's life, how's work. And she said, I know more about my sons and their friends than I've ever known. Again, it's stepping into those spaces. To the question around building multi-generational pipeline, I use that example to say, if we have this mindset where it's how we've done it in the past, it's how we're going to continue to do it in the future, I don't think we're going to get to a point where we fully understand each other and fully identify the possibilities that we can create with our strategies. So the call out is, we've got to put Gen Z into the conversation. We've got to say, what does that future look like? Again, 2030, 2035 is literally down the road. They're going to be the most, in 10 years, they're going to be the largest generation in the workforce. So we've got to start thinking, we're talking about a 10-year play right now. So we've got to bring them into the room. What does that look like? What does the world look like in 2030, 35? And are we ensuring that we're creating the right leaders to lead our organizations in that new world? So I think it's a combination of everyone playing together in that sandbox.
Great. And Chloe, these different generations bringing these unique perspectives and skills to the table, how do you think we can bridge the gap and create a culture where collaboration sparks real innovation, I guess?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I could say is getting Gen Z in the room. Even if they're just listening in, even if they're just observing, that is still really powerful. I think I mentioned earlier about on-the-job learning is really engaging for Gen Z, but also the best way to learn what may not come natural to us. Thinking, what do you wear to the office? You don't know what you don't know if you've never been in an office setting, if you've never seen it growing up, if it's never been something that you've had access to, you're not going to necessarily know the norms. And part of that too comes with communication. If we're talking about email etiquette, if you've never actually had been faced with that, that's not going to be something that's, second nature to you. So I would say, bringing them in the room in a real sense and also a metaphorical sense. And, we can establish those rules of engagement. My manager, I know when I first started, was very much like, I'm going to invite you to all these meetings. You don't have to have an opinion. You don't have to say something yet, but you can just be here and kind of understand and get the context. And it grew into where I would, message her kind of behind the scenes and say, hey, I think I understood this and I have an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea, but, what do you think? And, she would sometimes be like, not quite. Or she'd be like, yes, actually, that's a great idea. Let's talk about it. And then it grew into the point where now, in these meetings, the very same ones where I was just confused and did not understand a thing, now I'm contributing and actually offering up my own thoughts, which I think is what we all want, especially because I think Gen Z does have a lot of really good ideas and a unique perspective that should be heard.
That's great. Well, as always, we're running out of time, or nearly run out of time, to be fair. So before we say goodbye, I'm after a sound bite we want to leave our audience with. What can they take away, look into, or maybe an action, maybe Flo, from your perspective, what do leaders need to do? And maybe Chloe, let you finish off and have the last word. What do we think Gen Zers need to do? Is there something they can both do rather than waiting or expecting others? So Flo, what do you think?
So for leaders, I would say, in addition to call Korn Ferry, this is what we do quite a bit. But specifically to leaders, I would say, be flexible with expectations, with what you want, and communicate consistently.
Okay, great. And Chloe, any thoughts what you think fellow Gen Zers should be doing to kind of drive a bit of this or get some change happening?
Absolutely. I'd say ask questions and find mentors, find people that want to see you do well and learn from them. Find someone in a position that you want to be in and try to understand where they're coming from and also the norms of the workplace. Try to find ways to get that learning on your own and seek out people that really do want to be there for you and support you.
Brilliant. Fantastic way to finish. Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid that is it. So I'm going to have to say goodbye to you both. So thank you and see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to all of you out there for joining us and for those questions. There are some great questions there. Really appreciate that. As always, if you're looking for more information on this topic, you can read our guide, The 5 Steps of an End-to-End Leadership Development Strategy. I believe the link should be in the chat, so look out for that. Let's all remember, leadership is always evolving. And today we've explored one of the biggest shifts yet, how we engage and empower Gen Z. The truth is, they're not just the future of leadership, they're shaping it right now. As leaders, we have a choice. Do we resist change or do we embrace it and help guide the next wave of talent? So my challenge to you, start the conversations, create the opportunities, and be the leader you wish you had when you were starting out. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, goodbye.